On the 27th of September 1987, a baby girl was born to Pete and Margot Moran in the small village of Kilmagany outside Kilkenny City. The youngest of three girls, her name was Mairead. I was 16 and living over the road from the family. I had babysat the girls, as I recall, or maybe I was just visiting and annoying Margot, adding to the chaos of the house. Margot, their mother, was so easygoing and took it all in her stride. From what I remember, Pete, their father, eventually took over our local shop in the village, and Mairead and the girls would be there helping or hindering depending on how Pete saw it. Mairead was a funny little thing and always had a lollipop in her mouth, climbing the counter and chatting to the customers. Because there was 16 years between Mairead and I, my own life was moving on and I lost touch with the comings and goings of life in the village. So my story of Mairead is research based, from her family to her friends and the people who grew up with her and actually knew her for who she was. Mairead attended primary school in the village, later attending St. Bridget's College in Callan. After this, she went on to WIT, studying for 2 years. After graduating, Mairead was appointed manager of a retail chain, L'Occitane, a position she held for more than 5 years. In 2012, she was taken on as an assistant manager in the health food chain Holland and Barrett. In Mairead's personal life, she was a gas woman. Her interests extended to her many friends, theatre, costume, gaming, Harry Potter and cosplay. In 2013, her and her friends dressed up to go to the Comic-Con in Dublin, in which Mairead won Best Dressed for her Poison Ivy costume. Mairead's greatest talent lay in making and keeping loyal friends, which she continues to this day. Her friends set up a Facebook group, Mairead's Memories, and a fundraiser in her name for an animal welfare charity. Her birthday is celebrated every year and the anniversary of her death is remembered. Between 2005 and 2006, Mairead met Shane Smith. They dated for 8 months. She was only 17 and he was 19. As the relationship progressed, Smith seemed to become more possessive of Mairead. Mairead had been chosen to be part of a group to travel to Africa to help with building houses. After a day-long preparation session for the trip, one of the leaders showed concern for Mairead, as Smith had shown up and he stood over her for an hour and a half and then insisted Mairead left with him, which she did. At launch night for the event, Smith arrived and she later told her parents she wasn't going to do the project. Her mother on one occasion collected her from Kilkenny City to bring her home after visiting Smith. He was on the phone before she even got home, asking where she was, and Mairead would do her best to reassure him. On another occasion, the family were on holiday in Scotland. Mairead was almost hysterical trying to convince him that she was in Scotland, as Smith didn't believe her. In autumn 2005, Mairead moved into Kilkenny City, and her parents grew even more concerned and asked her to see a counsellor, which she did a number of times. Mairead broke up with Smith a while after that and moved back home, but this was not to be the end. After the breakup, Mairead agreed to meet with Smith to talk. She met him on the parade in the centre of Kilkenny with friends. Smith put his arm around her throat as she sat down and Mairead screamed. A security guard came out of the castle grounds and Smith ran away. The Gardaí were called and escorted Mairead home. Then the phone calls began. He would ring her phone at all hours of the night, and on one occasion he arrived at her home at midnight. Mairead decided not to make a complaint to the Gardaí as she wanted to get on with her Leaving Cert exams. In March 2014, a couple of months before Mairead, 26, died, she rang her mother to tell her Smith was back after years of not seeing him. He had shown up in the shopping centre where she worked and had spat at her and was sitting on a bench staring at her, and she was terrified. A request came through to the security guards to have Smith removed, and the security guards spoke to Mairead and she said he kept pacing up and down by her shop and he was freaking her out. Smith was removed swiftly from the premises. What Mairead didn't know was that Smith was a paranoid schizophrenic who had been diagnosed when he was 19. After he was released from the DOP, he refused to take his medication and so spent the next few years without medication and without treatment, until that fateful night where it would all come into fruition and Mairead would lose her life. On the 8th of May 2014, at around 8:30 in the evening, Mairead was working as usual. Smith turned up and this freaked her out once again. She rang security and they escorted him off the premises. But Smith went around to a side entrance of the shopping centre and headed again to where Mairead was working. He entered the shop and grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out through the doors, while continuously stabbing her with a 6-inch dagger. Mairead's screams got the attention of people around, and the security guard bravely got between Mairead and Smith and told him to drop the dagger, and the security guard kicked it away. Smith sat down on a ledge while people scrambled to help Mairead, putting pressure on her wounds to try stop the bleeding. Suddenly, Smith hopped up and scrambled out of the building. Security made chase but lost him when he jumped into a taxi. An ambulance and Gardaí were called and Mairead was rushed to St. Luke's Hospital, but they failed to resuscitate her and she was pronounced dead at 9:58 that night. Mairead's body was brought to Waterford Regional Hospital, where Dr. Mary Cassidy carried out a post-mortem. The examination showed evidence of 8 stab wounds and 6 incised wounds to the head, arm, chest, back and hand. One of the stab wounds had gone straight through her arm into the left side of her chest and into her heart and left lung. The stab wound to her lower back penetrated the right kidney and liver. These were both potential fatal injuries. The pattern of wounds on her arm and hand were in response to movement in a defensive manner. The Gardaí launched a manhunt straight away. Sirens were heard all over the city and helicopters were flying over trying to find Smith. Meanwhile, Smith arrived at his cousin's house and announced he had just stabbed his ex-girlfriend. His cousin didn't know whether to believe him, as she knew he was schizophrenic and she thought he was having delusions. She called Smith's brother and he contacted the Gardaí to see if it was true. The Gardaí headed to the house and bust through the door and arrested Smith straight away. When Smith was in custody, he told the Gardaí that he had stabbed Mairead because he thought she had tried to steal his blood when they were dating and he wanted to know why. He said she was part of a conspiracy group who had put cameras and poisonous spiders in his apartment. He believed that people were hacking into his computer games and Mairead was part of that. On the 10th of May, 2 days after Mairead died, Smith was formally charged with the murder of Mairead and he appeared at a special sitting at Kilkenny District Court. He applied for legal aid as he was not working and was on disability. He also applied for a psychiatric assessment. All were granted. He was remanded to Clover Hill Prison to appear at Clover Hill District Court on the 16th of May. At this court hearing, he was transferred to St. Vincent's Hospital for treatment and assessment. When in custody at St. Vincent's Hospital, he would not believe Mairead was dead because he said he could still see her. He believed she survived and that the Gardaí covered it up and was charging him with murder. On Monday the 12th of May, Mairead's funeral took place in the village of Kilmagany. Her funeral was attended by her family, friends and the community. Hundreds of people attended and they even had to use the second church in the village to hold the amount of people that turned up, and still there were people on the streets. Her brave parents, Pete and Margot, took to the altar to speak about their youngest daughter. Margot said Mairead was happy, smiling, loyal and independent. She loved her job and was looking forward to a new position as a manager with Holland and Barrett when they opened their second shop in the city. As Mairead put it herself, "You know me, ma'am, just getting on with life." Father Nicholas Flavin, curator of the funeral, followed it up perfectly by saying, "It wasn't in the plans for any of us to be here today, but circumstances in life change our plans and change our lives, sometimes radically, and leave them different as we journey into the future." On the 1st of February 2016, nearly 2 years after Mairead's death, Smith appeared at the Central Criminal Court and pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The trial lasted 5 days and a mountain of evidence and witnesses were put forward. To sum it up, psychiatric reports came from both the defence and prosecution, and it couldn't be denied that Smith was a paranoid schizophrenic. He did not have the capacity to form intent because of his mental disorder, and did not understand the nature and quality of his actions at the time. Smith truly believed that Mairead was part of a conspiracy, and he harboured a moral justification for his actions, and he was unable to refrain from these actions. The family and friends that met him earlier that day gave testimony. One friend told the court that she did not know Smith had schizophrenia. She said if she had known, she would have taken a course of action to protect him and others around him. When she met him that day, he was extremely agitated, telling her that people were stealing things from him. He said that his tattoos did things to him and caused problems. He said he had demonic tendencies. Smith's landlord testified he told him that he had been bitten by spiders on his face, but there were no marks. Another friend told of how Smith thought they were microchips in his body and was being forced into a gang war. His family testified in the past he thought his mother was evil and once tried to push her down the stairs, and he also assaulted his father. The two psychiatrists gave testimony that Smith thought that someone was putting toxins in his shampoo, which was getting into his brain. He was hearing voices and that thoughts were being put into and taken out of his brain without his control. They said months before the murder he was experiencing thought broadcasting. That is, people saying things he had been thinking. He believed that God spoke to him and he could control the weather. In the defence's closing statement, he implored the jury to find him not guilty by reason of insanity. Not for just Smith's sake, to get the treatment he needed, but for the protection of society so that this does not happen again. He said all the evidence pointed in one direction. It was also acknowledged that Mairead did not persecute, threaten or conspire against Smith, but he truly believed that she did, and this is the deep-rooted delusions, as the consequences of an enduring mental disorder going back many years. The prosecution told the jury that it was an unusual case because of the sheer volume of evidence and witnesses, which would be an advantage to the jury in reaching their verdict. He finally stated that both psychiatrists, for the defence and prosecution, concurred that the accused was incapable of forming the necessary intention of murder. You are the judges and you will decide on the evidence in this very difficult and tragic case. The jury of 9 women and 3 men came back with the verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity after 55 minutes of deliberation. Smith had no reaction to the verdict. Judge Hennigan ordered that Smith be detained at the Central Mental Hospital, where he will receive the treatment he needs and will stay indefinitely. Mairead's mother, Margot, passed away on the 13th of April 2021 after losing a battle with cancer, and she died peacefully at home. I'd like to finish off with the words that were spoken by Margot at Mairead's funeral. Mairead's greatest talent lay in making and keeping loyal friends, her circle ever expanding. We often teased her of her ability to summon a crowd at a moment's notice. These last few days, she has surpassed herself.